Ashe. Ashe is the word, the source of I and I ancestors. Ashe is the source that holds all things together. Ashe is I source, I shield, and I protector. Ashe is I source, I guide, and I provider. Ashe is I source, and that is why I am not black. Ashe is I source, I cannot be lack. Ashe is I source, I light, and I deliverer. Ashe is I source, I healer, and I teacher. Ashe is I source, I leader, and I spiritual fire. Ashe is I source, I strength. Each day I be more and more. Ashe is I source, I spiritual comforter. Each day I be more stronger. Ashe is I source, I sustainer. Each day my life is filled with more pleasure. Ashe walk with I daily to much green and greener pastures. Ashe walk with I beside some very cold and deadly waters. Ashe walk I through the valley of blackness and under the shadow of blackness. And so I fear no evil or what the devils may try to do. For it's Ashe, I say. Ashe, Ashe, I say. To you all my highly enriched melanin carbon skin brothers and sisters, my fellow Africans, my Mother Earth's original, Mother Earth's natural, native and organic humans the world over. It is I, the Mystic Philosopher, and welcome back one and all to this another perspective with I, the Mystic Philosopher. It's high time for reason and for reasoning. Now, as it is my custom, please let me take this opportunity right here and now and say goodwill to all those of you that have given and those of you that may give, and all those of you that will give of your very limited resources. Your very limited resources, also known as your very precious time, to join in, to watch and listen to this video broadcast and podcast. Goodwill to all those of you that take time out to subscribe to this my YouTube channel called The Right Number, and also to my blog post at themysticp.com. Goodwill to all those of you that may or that will take time out to donate and support what I'm doing, and especially goodwill to all those of you that have and that may and that will purchase my music and messages in songs. As you know, I'm not an entertainer, I'm a messenger. So my messages in songs, I thanks for your support. The link is right in the description section of this and all my other videos, or most of my other videos. Goodwill to all those of you that may or that will take time out to participate in the discussions, to critique and to write comments. Goodwill to all those of you that may or that will intelligently, informatively, and respectfully rebut with the honest intent of highlighting or correcting any and all possible statements or information that you might perceive to be erroneous and misleading, or that you can or that you may prove to be incorrect and misleading. As I oftentimes said, it is not my intent or my intention to, and I'm not interested in exposing people's ignorance. I'm only interested in what you know that I don't know, so that I may accumulate more knowledge, which will lead to understanding and, of course, wisdom. Goodwill to all those of you that will share your own perspectives on any of the topics that are covered in this or any series of lecture presentation by I, the Mystic Philosopher. Welcome. Thank you and goodwill to you all. The title of this lecture, this podcast and blog post is Racism, the Visitations of the Gods, the Elohim, another perspective by I, the Mystic Philosopher. It is also part of my series of presentations called The Redemption from the Curse of the Black Spell, aka the Black Spell. My goals and objectives in this lecture presentation today are to identify, define, and explain this thing called racism. What it is, how it is, why it is, where it is, how it got started, who and what started it, and also to answer and address the question of reverse racism, etc. Originally, I set out to do this as a 1 hour to 2 hour lecture, but due to the request of some of you, my listeners, that are more than interested in this topic, I have decided to do it in at least 3 to 4 parts. And for all those of you, my listeners, that have watched, listened, or read any of my previous videos and blog posts in this series, The Redemption from the Curse of the Black Spell, the Black Spell, you too will no doubt shortly hear, see, and agree that racism and the visitations of the gods, the Elohim, was and is a curse of the black spell, aka the black spell. Now, what is racism? From my perspective, the word racism, and by extension the words racist and reverse racism, are 3 of the most toxic words in the English language today. And they have been used sometimes very maliciously to ruin a lot of, oftentimes, some innocent people's lives. In other words, a lot of innocent people's lives have been destroyed because they have been wrongly or ignorantly accused of practicing racism, reverse racism, or they are being falsely called and labeled racist. Almost everyone is afraid of these 3 very potent words: racism, reverse racism, and by extension, the word racist. Now, if you should just go out in the street and do a random survey by randomly asking 100 people these 3 questions. 1, what is racism? 2, what is reverse racism? And 3, who is a racist? I can almost guarantee that you will get at least 100 different answers, or more accurately, you will get at the very least 100 different answers that are opinions, but none of which, or maybe only a few of which, truly define either words or give a definite answer to these three questions. The same is true among academicians, politicians, authors, and anti-racism activists, etc. Meaning, if you should randomly ask 100 of these prominent people the question, what is racism? I can almost guarantee you that they will give you at least 100 different opinions, and possible none, or possible not one definite answer. One of the most popular answer to the question, what is racism, that I have heard coming from some of these who I call systems scholars, or the systems scholars, the anti-racism activists, and some so-called black consciousness leaders. And when I say so-called, let me explain. I said so-called because, as most of you already know, that I do not deliberately call my people black unless you deserve to be called black. So this is why I said so-called black. It's not meant to be an insult. So that with that clarification, let me continue. So-called black consciousness leaders, writers, radio show hosts, commentators and speakers, etc., is the stipulative definition which states that racism is prejudice plus power. That is one of the most popular and common answers that I receive from these people when I ask, and what I heard when I asked the question, what is racism? In other words, one cannot practice racism, or one cannot be a racist if one is not a member of the dominant group, or the dominant class, or the dominant race of humankind. This at a glance seems and sounds to be a cop-out to me personally, and just a lame excuse for someone that is, or that might be guilty of racism or being a racist, but not wanting to admit to being a practitioner of racism, or not wanting, someone that is not wanting to be called a racist. But before I can honestly agree or disagree to this stipulative definition, which states that, again, I states that racism is prejudice plus power, I will have to take a deeper look at the word racism for myself and see if I too might arrive at the same or similar conclusion. That is, racism is prejudice plus power, or arrive at something else. And just to bring some of you up to speed, or just to remind you of what is meant by the phrase stipulative definition, here's a quote from the Free Encyclopedia Dictionary, Wikipedia, called wikipedia.org, at wikipedia.org, and I quote, a stipulative definition is a type of definition in which a new or currently existing term is given a new specific meaning for the purposes of argument or discussion in a given context. When the term already exists, this definition may, but does not necessarily, contradict the dictionary or the lexical definition of the term. Because of this, a stipulative definition cannot be correct or incorrect. It can only differ from one definition or from other definitions. But it can be useful for its intended purposes. Unquote. Now, the main point that I want, or the main point that I will let you, bear in mind here is that a stipulative definition is not a dictionary, aka a lexical definition. And from my perspective, with the exception of where or when it may try to infringe on my human intelligence, it meaning the dictionary, may try to infringe on my own human intelligence and my activated common sense, the English dictionaries is the final authority or are the final authorities for definition of all words in the English language. English dictionaries. Here's a quote from the said dictionary on racism. Said dictionary that I just quote from that gives the stipulative definition. And I quote, prejudice plus power is a stipulative definition of racism, often used by anti-racism activists, including the American pastor Joseph Barnes, The definition was first proposed by Patricia Bidall, who in a 1970 book defined it as prejudice plus institutional power. According to this definition, two elements are required in order for racism to exist: racial prejudice and social power, to codify and enforce this prejudice into an entire society. Reasons cited in support of this definition include that power is responsible for the creation of racial categories and that people favor their own racial groups over others. The reaction of students to this definition tends to be mixed, with some thinking that it makes sense and others perceiving it as an unfair redefinition of racism to portray whites as an unfairly negative in an unfairly negative light. In 2004, Beverly Tatum wrote that many of her white students find it difficult to relate to this definition on a personal level, but they do not perceive themselves either as prejudice or as having power, unquote. And again, this is taken from the free encyclopedia called wikipedia.org, at wikipedia.org. So here in this article, we see that not only is racism defined as prejudice plus power, but that this definition was first proposed by one Patricia Bidall, who in a 1970 book defined it as prejudice plus institutional power. According to Dr. Claude Anderson, author and president of Powernomics Corporation of America Inc., on the question of what is racism as it concerns black. And I quote, "Racism is a wealth and power-based competitive relationship between blacks and non-blacks. The sole purpose of racism is to support and ensure that the white majority and its ethnic subgroups continue to dominate and use blacks as a means to produce wealth and power. Centuries of black enslavement and Jim Crow, semi-slavery, resulted in the majority society becoming 99-foot giants and blacks 1-foot midgets. This massive inequality in wealth and resources made blacks non-competitive and totally dependent upon whites for the necessities of life. True racism exists only when one group holds a disproportionate share of wealth and power over another group, then using those resources to marginalize, exploit, and subordinate the weaker group. He continued, in America, there are some whites who use wealth and power to marginalize, exploit, and subordinate blacks. Whites can deny blacks employment, educational opportunities, business resources, a place to live, or the right to vote. Therefore, according to this definition, black people cannot be racist. No group of blacks has the power or exclusive control of resources to the degree that they can educationally, politically, economically, and socially exploit and marginalize the white race. Blacks can only react to racism and try to alter the condition that racism creates. Unquote. This also is a very bold, this by Dr. Claude Anderson's, is a very bold, unapologetic, powerful, and straightforward statement. And definition I might add, and of racism. And some might even consider it to be inflammatory. In fact, some have considered it to be inflammatory and controversial. By him even making this statement, some of you will accuse him of being racist, etc. But again, before the mystic philosopher, can honestly agree or disagree with him here, let me take a much closer look for myself on what is racism, or what the word racism really and truly means. Please remember that this is not my language. This is the English, the English language. Here is another quote on the subject, this time to the contrary. And it is taken from an online college newspaper article titled Opinion, No Racism. Opinion, no. Racism is not prejudice plus power. So this article is in rebuttal to the stipulated definition of racism is equal to prejudice plus power, and also a rebuttal to what Dr. Anderson is hereby saying, that because of melanated people or African Americans are so marginalized and so deprived of opportunity, etc., etc., why they cannot be racist. And his definition, as was clearly explained a while ago in his quote. So here I'm going to quote from this newspaper, and I quote, it is also, let me remind you that it is, the article again is titled No Racism, No Racism, rather, the article is titled Opinion, No Racism is not prejudice plus power, and it is written by one Christopher Estrada Salazar. And I quote, "The sociological definition that racism is prejudice plus power is immoral and dishonest. Though it's amusing how non-white people attempt to absolve themselves of their racism on account of their non-existent institutionalized power, they are in effect racist," unquote. I just mentioned that because of the straightforward and very plain and explanatory statement that Dr. Claude Anderson had said about racism, that there are others who not only disagree, but accuse him of being racist himself. But let me continue. Unquote. Now I recommend that you, my listening audience, please go and read the entire article for yourselves. At the website is tsl.news. It's a college website. And I also will recommend that while at it, that you please read the comment section. Read the comment section as well. And no doubt you too will notice this very strong feelings and emotions that are expressed in both the article, the rest of the article. I just read just one quote itself. So that you will see the strong emotions that are expressed in both the article itself and the comments left by the readers. So here we see that not only is this writer disagreeing with the stipulative definition of racism, and by extension, the definition given by Dr. Claude Anderson, and others I might add, and that racism is prejudice. Not only is he disagreeing that racism is prejudice plus power, but he went on to passionately say that it is immoral and dishonest just to say, or to believe, or to know that racism is prejudice plus power. It is like when I, the mystic philosopher, not only passionately say, but also passionately prove of a fact that for a group of people to arbitrarily call, label, name, list, and exalt themselves as white people, as the white race of people, while on the contrary, they call, label, name, and list us, my people, as black, as the black people, as the black race of people, is not only dishonest. I passionately stated that is not only dishonest, but it is grossly immoral as well. But here again, before I can agree or disagree with the author of this article, I must take a much deeper and detailed look at the word racism and examine its manifestations in order to come to a logical and an honest conclusion, and so that I too may not be accused of being immoral, dishonest, or both. So with that said, what is racism? What is reverse racism? And who is a racist? From I, the mystic philosopher's perspective. From my perspective, to honestly answer the question, what is racism, we must first know and answer the question, what is race? Or what is a race? And once we have a clear knowledge and understanding of what is racism, then the questions of what is reverse racism or who is a racist will automatically answer themselves. And again, just to remind you that this is not my language, and that I don't know the language, and that the closest that I think that I can get, or I think I may ever get to knowing this language and to interpret the secrets and mindset of the owners of the language, of this language, that are here enveloped in the secrets and mindsets that are here enveloped in. Let me repeat that. The closest that I think I may ever get to knowing this language and the secrets and mindsets of the owners of the language that are herein enveloped, the secrets that are herein enveloped in the language and in its word, is with and by my constant reference and study of their English dictionaries. In other words, I just don't go around regurgitating what I've been taught or what I heard other people say, but I like to verify it from the English dictionary. And as I have mentioned earlier, and from my perspective, with the exception of where or when it or they may try to infringe on my human intelligence and my activated common sense. For example, when the lexicographers are trying, the lexicographers of the English language, which are English lexicographers, are trying to insult my basic intelligence and my activated common sense by telling I, the mystic philosopher, and trying to convince me that Caucasian people are white, that the Caucasoid race of humankind are a white race of people, and that we, the Earth's original, organic and highly enriched melanin, highly enriched carbon skin humans, aka Africans, are black. That we are the black people. That we are the Negro race of people. With the exception of that and those lies, and other blatant, overt, and covert miscarriage of truth and justice, the English dictionaries are, from my perspective, the final authority for the definition of all words in their English language. But I have already labored this fact over and over and over again, so most of you that have watched or listened to me over the years know my firm and unapologetic stance on this by now. Let us see what the dictionaries have to say about racism. Or let us see how the English dictionaries defined and use the words, defined and answer the questions. What is race? What is ism? And what is racism? And I say dictionaries because I like to read and quote from different English dictionaries, and more than one English dictionary. Now, race. Definition of race. 1. Race, a noun. And I quote, competition between runners. That's the first definition. Competition between runners, horses, vehicles, boats, etc. to see which is the fastest in covering a set course. And 2, a strong or rapid current flowing through a narrow channel in the sea or river. That's one definition as a noun. The second definition as a verb, and I quote, compete with another or others to see who is fastest at covering a set course or achieving an objective. And 2, move or progress swiftly or at full speed, unquote. And of course, those quotes are from the Google search dictionary. Second dictionary on the word race, and I quote: 1, a breeding stock of animals. 2a, a family, tribe, people, or nation belonging to the same stock. 2b, a class or kind of people unified by sheer interest, habits, or characteristics, unquote. And that is from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary Online. 3, again, race, again as a noun, and I quote: a distinct group of people, the members of which share certain inherited physical characteristics, such as skin color, form of hair, etc., and transmit them. All descendant of a person, family, or a people. The race of David, as an example. And this quote is from the New Lexicon Webster's Dictionary of the English language. Now, from these few definitions of the word race, we can readily see, and we must also know and understand, that when we use the word race, and when we talk about race, that we are not only talking about a breeding stock of animals, thereby creating a new race or a new breed of animals. And for that matter, we are not talking only about a breed of stock of humans and humankind, thereby creating a new race or a new breed of human and humankind. But that we are also talking about competition. We're talking about competition in and between races. Meaning, in and between the original race and the newly created races of both animals, human and humankind alike. And as you shall no doubt shortly see, know and understand, that it was and that it is out of the creation of the new races of humankind by the unnatural processes, also known as artificial processes, scientific processes, genetic manipulations, eugenics, and practices of interbreeding, mixing and hybrid breeding, etc., etc., that the doctrines, the belief systems, philosophies, and practices of the evil thing called racism originated and continued to plague our natural humanity. For example, the factual evidence interpreted by our basic activated common sense has shown, and will no doubt continue to show, that if or when 2 species, breeds, races of dogs are successfully bred, aka successfully mixed, the resultant or the product of that breeding or mixing is neither of the original species, or neither of the original breeds or races or canis or dogs, but that it is a new product, aka a new race, a new breed which is at best called a mixed race, a mixed breed, a crossbreed, or an interbreed, an interrace, a hybrid or a hybrid race, etc., of dogs is created. When you mix them, you can get neither of the original, but you get a new race, a new breed, or a new species, a new canis, a new set of dogs. Example, the breeding stock of dogs, such as the German Shepherd, the Golden Retrievers, the Chows, etc. And as soon as the new, and those are the examples. These are the examples of the breeding stocks of dogs, right? And as soon as the new breed, aka the new race of dog, or any other animals for that matter, comes onto the scene, or as soon as a new breed or race of dog or other animals is created and enter onto the world or into the world, competition for any and everything starts. So you can even say competition starts as a result of the introduction of new races, new breeds, and new species of things. But we're getting close to that. And for those of you, my people, that do not quite get what competition is, or what competition means, and what I mean by competition, it means rivalry, competitiveness. It means vying for any and everything. It means contesting. It means opposition. It means contention. It also means conflict, feuding. It means battling, fighting, struggling. It means strife. And it means war, competition. And no doubt, as you shall shortly see and understand, that it is as a result of the breeding, the creation of the humankind, also known as the Adamic race and races, that all these evils came upon the earth. All these evils that we, and abominations that we are, as people are now experiencing and are subjected to, it is as a result of the creation, or the breeding, the making of the humankind called the Adamic race and races. And the more new breed, aka the more mixed race and mixed breed animals or dogs come on to the scene, any animal, dog, cat, the more mixed race that come on the scene and into the world, is the more competition there are for everything and everything. And the evidence has shown, and will no doubt continue to show, that the same is true for humans and humankind alike. The more mixed race, aka race mixing, race breeding, cross breeding, interbreeding, hybrid breeding, etc., etc., that come on the scene is, and into the world, is the more competition we have for any and everything. You name it. As there are competition, and there are competition for it. Name it, and there are competition for it. And who are competing? The mix, the newly arrival, the Johnny come lately. And the evidence will also show that at the core of the new creation is the belief and intent that the new race, the new breed, is better and superior to the original, or to their original parents. Here again are evidence of the origin of the thing called racism. But much more on this point later. And just for your information, these new creations, also known as these new mixed animals or these mixed humans and humankind are not nature's production, also known as natural animals and natural humans. They are not natural animals or natural humans. Nature's production. Please remember, and why do I say that? I want you to please remember that the first law of our mother nature is self-preservation. And from my perspective, self-preservation means just that, self-preservation. And our activated common sense will tell us that we cannot preserve something or someone by mixing it or mixing them with something or someone else. Therefore, it is the will and intent of our mother nature's children, be they animals, plants, fishes, or humans, to preserve themselves as our mother nature has produced and preserved them for thousands of years, if not for millions of years or forever. And the purpose of producing and preserving itself and themselves is by mating, the process of producing and preserving itself and themselves is by mating, cohabiting, and mating and cohabiting with its and by their own kind, its kind and by their own kind, and within its own group or its own race, and within their own group and their own race or their own breed, if you will. But like the humankind, the kind of human, aka the creatures and devils among us that were themselves created by their creator God, possible through domestic, scientific, and genetic mixing and crossbreeding them. These unnatural animals are made by them. It is not nature that go around mixing animals together. All those pets and these little things that you see, they are not natural. But it is the creatures mimicking their creator God, their scientific God, that are responsible for breeding, crossbreeding, and making them. These unnatural animals are made by them, the humankind. They are made, or if you prefer, created by deliberately and intentionally violating and manipulating the natural laws of our mother and source, Mother Nature. I've dealt with this in more detail elsewhere. We now know of a fact that nature did not naturally produce domesticated dogs. Domesticated dogs are a mixture or a breeding of wolves, foxes, jackals, and who knows what else. They mix them up. You won't find some little poodle and these things running in the wilds. These are man-made. These are creatures. Just like the cow. It's not a natural animal. But more than that. But that is a whole topic. This mixture and breeding and how these things are created is a whole topic in and by itself, and one that I talk about and shared some of my perspective, some of my thought-provoking perspective, if I might add. I shared on them elsewhere. However, and just to prove my point, let me read you a quote from a dog, what I call a dog site called Shepped, shepped.com, SHEPPED. And I quote, "There are many dogs which are a mix between German Shepherd and other breed. German Shepherds have been successfully mixed with Golden Retrievers, Chows, Labradors, pugs, Siberian Huskies, Collies, Welsh, Corgis, Pit Bulls, Rottweilers, Poodles, Chinese Wolves, Akita, and more. Unquote. So now let's get back to the definition of race. 2. Definition of the word race. A family, tribe, people, or nation belonging to the same stock. And 2b, a class or kind of people unified by shared interests, habits, or characteristics. A distinct group of people, the member of which shared certain inherited physical characteristics, and I mentioned that before: skin, color, form of hair, etc., and transmit them, all descendants of a person, a family, or a people, as in the race of David. Now again, I quote this from the Lexicon Webster's Dictionary of the English Language. And finally, on the definition of race, for now, let me read a quote from Wikipedia. Race. A race is a group of humans based on shared physical or social qualities into categories generally viewed as distinct by society. The term was first used to refer to speakers of a common language, and then to denote national affiliations. By the 17th century, the term began to refer to physical, phenotypical traits. Unquote. Wikipedia.org. Now that we have a good and reasonable knowledge and understanding of what the word race means, I know hopefully we have what the word race means and what a race is, let me now focus on the word or the suffix ism, as in racism. Ism, a suffix appearing, I quote, ism, a suffix appearing in loan words from Greek, where it was used to form action nouns from verbs. An example given: baptism. On this model, use as a productive suffix in the formation of nouns denoting action or practice, state or condition. Principal doctrines are principles, doctrines, a usage or characteristic, devotion or adherence, etc. And some examples given here are like criticism, barbarism, Taoism, despotism, plagiarism, realism, witchism, intellectualism, etc. And that quote is taken from dictionary.com. In other words, whenever you hear the word, any word that has the word ism, you must know immediately that some form of doctrine, some form of practice, or some principles is involved. Now, from my mystic philosopher perspective, all isms are of and belong to the family of ism. And almost all, from my perspective, and almost all isms and words that ends or words that end with the suffix ism are of the devil, and thus they are evil. Whenever you hear ism, be it schisms or ism, once you hear ism attached to a word, we're starting to have problem. It denotes some form of evil, especially as it relates to us melanated people. And just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. And what I mean here when I say all words, words that end with isms, if not all words that end with ism are evil. Just to give you an example of what I mean, here are a few examples of words in the English language, of course, that end with the suffix ism that, from my perspective, and the evidence will show, are evil. First word, nationalism. National, no problem, but the minute ism is added to it, you know you have a doctrine. Yeah, and those doctrines sometimes can become very extreme and violent. Ism, again. Socialism. Social, fine. Add ism to it, you start to have problem. Communism. Commune is okay. We can deal with that. But the minute ism is added to it, we know we have problem. Capitalism. Capital, we can handle capital. Yeah. But then again, when it becomes an ism, or when ism attached to it and modifies it, that's problem. Fascism, well, that is demonic in itself. Totalitarianism, that is also problematic, devious. Fundamentalism, fundamentals, the basics of anything, the understanding of it, be it fund, money, the mental mind, is no problem. But the minute ism is added to it, you know you have a problem. Check out all these fundamental groups, are groups that are labeled as fundamentalists and practicing fundamentalism. Supremacism. You know you have a problem right there. Colonialism, sectarianism, conservatism, conservationism, neo-conservationism, liberalism, racism, even veganism become extreme problem. Vegan, no problem. But ism, check it out. You start to have problem. Cannibalism, that again is within itself, is evil. And the list goes on and on and on. Just food for thought. Any ism, think of an ism. And then look at the evils that are associated with it, or the practices. And look at the demonic manifestation of that word, or within that word. Just think of anyone. I know one popular one may come to your mind right now, a religious one, but look at it. Look at the history. Anyhow, let's continue. So from just belonging to and being a part of the family of ism, without me having to say anything, you now know, or you can now affirm that racism is evil. Race, fine. But the minute it becomes racism, ism is added to it, that's when they start to have doctrines, teachings and philosophies of hate, antagonism, etc., as we shall start to see. That's when it becomes evil. So right there you see that racism is evil. Now let us see what we have when race become racism and a member of the family of ism. Racism, let's get the definition of the word racism now from the dictionary. It means prejudice. Racism, 1, prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership to a particular racial or ethnic group. Typically, one that is a minority or marginalized. And 2, the belief that distinct races possesses different characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially so as to distinguish them as inferior or superior one to another. Unquote. And that is a quote from the UK dictionary at lexico.com. Now please notice that racism is defined here as what I will describe as a deadly package, a lethal envelope, a bullet, a capsule, or a container that contains the potential deadly virus called prejudice, discrimination, and antagonism, or the deadly viruses which are called prejudice, discrimination, and antagonism, and that it meaning racism, the deadly package, etc., is directed against a person or a people, meaning it is sent from a source towards a targeted people, a person, or target towards a people. Or if you prefer, it, again, racism, the package, is sent or projected from a source in the direction of a person or a people on the basis of their membership of a particular racial or ethnic group. And again, I ask that you please note that the basis or the reason for this source directing, pointing, or shooting this deadly package towards a person or a people is because they have membership or because they belong to a particular racial or ethnic group. And typically, or usually, or in most cases, it is directed against a person or a people that is a minority or that is marginalized. It is also interesting to learn from a careful study and understanding of this and other definitions of racism that the one that is firing the deadly bullet or firing the deadly package called racism is the one that has the weapon and the ability to discharge the weapon. 2, that the deadly package that is being sent or discharged has to be sent or discharged from a source that possesses and is contaminated with the deadly virus, aka a racist. It has to be transmitted from a racist who is already contaminated with the deadly virus of racism. And also that those that have the weapon cannot fire it or discharge it amongst themselves or hurt themselves with it. A group cannot be racist amongst themselves. They don't destroy themselves. In other words, racism or a group of people cannot be racist amongst themselves. Now please note that here in definition 2 of this UK's dictionary's definition, racism is defined as the belief but not the knowing, or not as the knowledge but the belief. And for those of you that have listened to me over the years, you have no doubt heard me on several occasions break down, define, and explain to you all the words belie, belief, and believe. I also told you that it is a trinity of lies, or the trinity of deception. And that I have logically and sensibly proved to you that believing is not knowing. That if or when we say that we believe, we are admitting or confessing that we really and truly don't know. We do not know when we believe. And that if or when we know, there is no more need for us to believe. Knowledge replaces ignorance. Therefore, should you or should we know and know of a fact, again I quote, that different races possesses distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially so as to distinguish them as inferior or superior to one another, unquote, then the question that we must honestly ask and honestly answer is this: is knowing this as a fact racism? And does knowing this as a fact makes the knower a racist? Remember again, ladies and gentlemen, my brethren, my people, we are dealing with the Inglai language. The Ing, and the English language. You cannot just skip over a word and think we know it, especially we melanin people. That's why I like to give the definition, because there's a difference between the meaning and the definition. Most often we get a meaning, an average of what is being said, of what is meant, but not the definition. Because again, it's the Inglai language, so we have to spend time defining and thoroughly understanding the word. Let us not think that, just assume that we are bright and because we've been through the system and we get some schooling and blah blah blah, we get high marks in our English classes, means that we know the words that we use. We really know their intent, and we truly understand what is enveloped in them. In fact, to quote Mutabaruka, this language, the Inglai language, or the English language, is a trichology language. Or if you prefer, it is a language of tricks. I heard Mutabaruka some years ago, use the term trichology. I'm sure you might not be able to find it in a dictionary, but if you understand what he's saying, trichology. In other words, a language of tricks, trickeries, a language of cons and confusions. I will get back to this point of what I call the lying language shortly, when I shall define and answer the question, what is reverse racism? Now please let us carefully examine this statement for a moment. From the quote, from the dictionary. Different races possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities. Now, basic activating common sense should tell us that the fact that a group of people is called a race is because if or when it is compared to another group or other groups of people, it is obvious that it is different. And if it is not different from those that it is being compared to or compared with, then it is not a race. Different meaning it is not the same as another, or it is not the same as the others. It is unlike in nature, form, or quality. It is unique. It possesses distinct characteristics, abilities, and qualities. In other words, every other race possesses its own distinct characteristics, abilities, and qualities. Now, please note that I did not say that other races did not or might not possess some, if not all, of the same characteristics, abilities and qualities, etc. But obviously, one is more distinguishable than the others. So from my perspective, these facts are not racism. And nor does knowing these facts makes one a racist. Knowing these facts does not make the knower a racist. However, the potential for these facts and the knowledge of these facts to become evil, to become racism and racist, is in the extension of this dictionary's definition, and I quote, especially so as to distinguish them as inferior or superior one to another, unquote. That, from my perspective, is potentially evil. Racism and racist. And what do I mean by potentially evil? Racism and racist. I mean that to say that one race of people can live, survive, and withstand certain extreme temperature, be it hot or cold, or to say that one race of people can live, survive, and withstand living at a higher altitude, or rather living at higher altitude without any health or other issues over the other race or races, or to say that one race of people are far more highly melanin, carbon enriched over another and possible over all others, from my perspective, is not at all evil. It is not evil, it is not racism, and it is not racist, or being racist. However, to label and call one race of humans white and another race of human black, which is the direct opposite, and to label one race of human superior, another race of human inferior, or to label and say that one race is superior and all other races are inferior, and as such, the one that is labeled superior now has the inherent right to dominate, to subdue, to subjugate, to exploit, to antagonize, to mistreat, and to enslave another race or all other races. Then, from the mystic philosopher's perspective, that is evil. That is racism. And that is being racist. For example, the so-called white supremacist ideology. But much more on that later. Here are two more quotes from two more dictionaries on the definition of racism. And I quote, "It was first defined by the Oxford English Dictionary, the second edition in 1989, as the theory that distinct human characteristics and abilities are determined by race." The same dictionary termed racism as a synonym of racialism, belief in the superiority of a particular race, unquote. Here again, I ask that you please note that the Oxford English Dictionary, and that was taken from the Oxford English Dictionary, of course, the Oxford English Dictionary's definition of racism, that it too is based on a theory, aka a belief and not a proven fact. It is based on the theory, aka the belief, that the Caucasian or the Caucasoid race of humankind is superior to all other races as a result of their main conspicuous and identifiable distinct humankind characteristics, which is their melanin / carbon deficient skin complexion, aka their pale, pinkish pale, reddish pink, polar skin complexion. Racism, from the Webster's Dictionary. And again, I quote, "A belief that race is the primary determinant of human," what did I say? Racism, Merriam-Webster's Dictionary. And let me quote one, "A belief that race is the primary determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race." And 2a, "A doctrine of political program based on the assumption of racism and designed to execute its principles." And 2b, "A political or social system founded on racism." And 3, "Racial prejudice or discrimination," unquote. So, this will be the end of part 1. Of this lecture presentation titled Racism and the Visitation of the Gods. I will just end this right here. Racism and the Visitation of the Gods, the Elohim, another perspective by the mystic philosopher. Thanks for watching. I ask that you please join me shortly, or join me in part 2, where I will be answering the question and sharing my perspective on what is reverse racism. I've covered racism in much detail. I'm sure there are questions and I look forward to answering them. So right now I'm just going to end this part 1 here and get back to part 2. So please join me. I am the Mystic Philosopher. It's high time for reason and for reasoning. Ashe, 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 I say.